What's the scariest encounter you've had with a total stranger? Story 1. When my daughter turned 1, we took a trip to Hawaii. As we sat in the airport, waiting to check in, a man approached and started commenting on how beautiful she was. At first, I said thank you, but it didn't stop there. He stood over me uncomfortably close, asking question after question. Her age, her birthday, her favorite things, where we were headed. I refused to answer, but he wouldn't leave. We were stuck there, and I felt trapped. As soon as my husband returned, the man backed off quickly. I reported the interaction to airport security, but they didn't take any action. Later, at our gate, I noticed him again. He sat down in a position where he could watch our daughter. Each time we moved seats, he adjusted to keep her in view. I told the gate agent, but they brushed it off as nothing. We boarded the plane only to realize he had managed to get on as well, seated where he could keep an eye on her the entire time. He kept smiling at her, getting up repeatedly to walk the aisles and pass by her seat. It felt deliberate. At one point, when my husband got up, the man leaned in and said in an unsettling baby talk voice, "I found out where you're going, didn't I?" That was enough. I reported him to the flight attendant, who thankfully took it very seriously. She wasn't messing around. He was immediately moved to a different seat and told he was not allowed to get up again for the rest of the flight. When we landed, there were people waiting for him, security or airport staff, I'm not sure, but he was escorted away and we never saw him again. I am 100% certain our daughter would have been kidnapped or trafficked if we had not been on high alert and reported him. That was 2 years ago, and I still remember how terrified I was. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I was once driving in the country, and it was pouring rain in the dead of night. So hard that I was driving very slowly and couldn't see any of the signs. It was before GPS. I mean, I had never been in rain this heavy. I had to pull over to the side of the road to try and see the sign to see if I was going in the right direction. I didn't get out due to the rain, so I was stretching my neck forward to try and make out where I was when suddenly the passenger door opened and a man got inside the car, sat down and looked at me. Here in South Africa, there is a fair amount of violent crime and hijackings, so I instinctively started panicking and yelling and shouting at the top of my lungs, flailing my arms to try and do something, anything to stop this guy from attacking me. He started shouting as well in terror and jumped out of the car. I quickly leant over and closed the passenger door and sped off down the road. I was breathing so heavily at this point and trying my best to calm down, nearly in tears. I kept replaying it in my head the whole time and suddenly remembered that the man smiled at me. It suddenly dawned on me that it was probably a hitchhiker that I hadn't seen, who thought that I was pulling over to give him a lift, only to be greeted by me screaming and trying to hit him. It was probably his scariest encounter with a stranger as well. Story 3. When I was about 6, I was with my family at an incredibly crowded street festival we go to every year. I remember we had stopped to watch a band play for a minute or two, and then my mom, I assume, took my hand, and we continued walking. After a few seconds, I realized the hand I was holding was puffy and hot, and my mom's hands were always cool and more slender, so I knew it wasn't her hand I was holding. I looked up to see a woman with long blonde hair and sunglasses grinning down at me. I said, "You're not my mom," and she just laughed and said, "That's okay, you can come with me anyway." Obviously, my mom and dad had realized I was not with them at this point and were panicking. My dad just happened to look in the exact right direction at the right time and saw this lady leading me away through a break in the crowd. He ran over to us, grabbed her shoulder, and she dropped my hand and disappeared in the crowd. I still can't believe he spotted us. It was like shoulder-to-shoulder people at this thing. Story 4. It's a mix of the scariest and the best. I was 11 years old and at the park with my cousin who was 3. My cousin, being a stubborn 3-year-old, told me to leave him be, and I sat out on the bench. I was just reading my book and occasionally looking up, until this man, probably in his 50s, sat down next to me and just started talking. He asked me which kid was mine about 4 times, even after I made it quite clear I was uncomfortable. Then he got all close to me and said, "Do you want another one?" So I started freaking out, until this homeless man, who I later knew to be Marty, pulled me off the bench, told the man he was lucky he didn't hit him in his jaw, and told me to go home. I'm glad Marty showed up, because I don't know what I would have done. Update: Marty says hello. Story 5. I dropped my son off at school one morning, and then went to the grocery store with my infant daughter. It was so early. There were only one or two other customers. There was an older man with a walker that I didn't really pay too much attention to, who kept showing up in the same aisle as us. I got out to my car, put my groceries in, and then was placing my daughter in her car seat when the man came up behind me. He asked me a question, and when I turned to answer, he shoved his walker into the back of my legs, pinning me against my car inside the open door. I tried to move, but couldn't go anywhere except forward, and he started pushing me down to the floor of my car. I was terrified that once he had me down there, he would go for my daughter, so I threw myself over her. My whole upper body was in her car seat, and wedged myself in tightly to cover as much of her as I could. He grabbed me by the hair and was trying to pull me up when someone started honking their car horn. Another mom had been sitting in her car with her own baby asleep and had seen what was happening. Another car pulled up behind mine, and the man ran over and got in quickly, clearly never needing the walker. The police were called, but the plates on the car he left in were stolen, so as far as I know, he was never found. Story 6. More creepy than scary, but one time I was in a public library browsing books. Mind you, it was rather packed with most of the seats taken. There were a bunch of couches near where I was browsing, and I had a gut feeling that this man sitting there was staring at me. I continued minding my own business, looking for books, when suddenly that man stood up and walked directly towards me. I pretended not to notice until he said, "Hey young lady." I was probably 14 at the time, and he didn't speak English, but I understood. I thought that if the worst came to worst, he was just looking for a book, so I looked up. He then asked, "Do you want to be my friend?" I was very creeped out. This man was at least in his 60s, asking a 14-year-old girl to be his friend, in public. I pretended I only understood English, and that I didn't get what he was trying to say, and walked away. Thank goodness that library was packed. Story 7. I was traveling home to California, and I was in Nevada. It was an emergency, so I packed and left at around midnight. It was about 5:30 a.m. or so in rural Nevada. I was at a stop on my usual route. I was very familiar with the particular stop, and it was just an hour or so before the California border. Being a lone female, I concealed carry. I have my extended permit, which allows concealed carry through several states, except California. I was in my truck in an empty spot, and I was in the cab disassembling and putting away my firearm to be in compliance. I stepped out to go to the restroom, and someone had managed to get close to my truck and was hiding along the passenger side. I didn't know it until I'd walked past them. Whoever it was grabbed me from behind. I let out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream, an Oscar-winning scream. But there were no other people at this stop. I fought and tried to shake the person off, but I wasn't doing very well. Kicking led him to lift me off the ground where I couldn't reach him, and trying to break through his arms made him bend me over with him still behind me. I'm not sure how long I was screaming and fighting, but then I heard tires screeching. I figured it was the creepy van my parents had warned me about as a kid coming to take me away. Nope, it was a Toyota Corolla full of local teenagers headed to the gas station before school. The teens jumped out and ran toward us. The person who grabbed me took off. Two of the kids chased him through the desert beyond the gas station on foot, while the driver and the other kid stayed to make sure I was okay. I send these 4 boys Christmas and birthday cards every year. I'm sure if it weren't for them, I would have been kidnapped, or worse. Josh, Austin, Mason, and James. Thank you guys. Story 8. Something very similar happened to me while at work. I work in a store with adult products, typically alone. When I was about 2 months in, this guy came in, and right away, I noticed something was off about this guy. He started asking me to help him find corn, which we aren't allowed to do for safety reasons. As most of our DVD section has no camera coverage, and management at the time forbade us from going back there with customers. I refused to help this guy find his solo diddling material, and he goes, "What, it's not like I'm going to SAU." He walks away and then comes back up to me less than a minute later, asking for help with a product this time. I go over and tell him about this product. Out of nowhere, he asks me how much I weigh. I said, "Oh, I'm not sure, probably 210 to 220. He goes, "No way, I don't believe you," and he wraps his arms around me way too tightly and lifts me up off the ground. I had to literally beg this guy to put me down, and he didn't until I said, "Please, I have a bad back problem." I was beside myself and fully panicking, so I beelined it for the counter and waited for him to leave a few minutes later. I called my manager in tears. I was a mess. I've only seen him twice since then, and I kicked him out for stealing. Story 9. When I was 10, I was at a drugstore reading a comic when a man who looked like Santa started talking to me. He had duct tape and paper towels in his cart. I remember because I spent a lot of time there but never realized they even had carts. He asked if I could come to his apartment across the street to help him move some boxes. I told him I'd have to ask my mom. Then, leaning in quietly, he added that he had some penthouse apartments I could have in exchange. I immediately stood up, walked to the counter, and told the lady what he said. The man hurried out just as she was dialing security. I don't think they caught him, but they did have him on the security cameras. Story 10. I was about 10, getting back home from the park with my sister. She, being the stubborn younger, I need no older sister playing mom to me sibling, walked purposely 20 meters ahead, so nobody would even think we were together. She rounds the corner, and I hear a terrifying scream. I never covered 20 meters so fast in my life. I round the corner, and there's a man holding my sister by her throat, dragging her into an open car parked nearby. When he sees me advancing and yelling incomprehensibly, I honestly don't know what I yelled. I was scared out of my mind, and he realizes there's two of us. He drops her, jumps into the car, and drives off. She had fingerprint-shaped bruises on her throat for days. Story 11. An older woman approached me on campus one day, asking if I could take her to a spot in town she couldn't find. I said no. It was a new city for me too, and honestly, she gave off strange vibes. She insisted it was just around the corner, so it wouldn't take long. That's when I got even more uncomfortable. If she suddenly knew it was close, why did she need help finding it? I refused again. She paused for a moment, then quietly walked off. A nearby older man asked if she needed directions, but she just passed him without a word. I thought it was odd, but I didn't dwell on it. The next week, I got a class and checked my phone. Someone had posted an article. The same older woman had just been arrested in a nearby town, connected to multiple human trafficking cases. From the description alone, I knew it was the woman I had talked to. Story 12. When I was around 14 or 15, I was walking my dog through a forest near home. Along the path, I encountered a large man who stopped me and, without much preamble, told me he had failed to report back to his mental hospital, but that I shouldn't be afraid. He started talking about purgatory, describing how painful it had been, and then shifted to hell, insisting it was 1,000 times worse. The way he described it was vivid and unsettling, like something straight out of a Hieronymus Bosch painting or the Hindu Book of the Dead. Then he looked at me desperate and begged me to pray for him. I told him I would. Incidentally, back then, my school gym was located across the street from a mental hospital. Occasionally, patients would be let out for supervised walks, and we'd pass them on our way to gym class. It was a bit eerie, sure, but we were in a group in the middle of a city, so it felt manageable. Being alone in the forest with that man was something entirely different. Isolated, outside of civilization, I felt truly vulnerable. To his credit, he didn't try to harm me. He spoke, pleaded, and eventually let me go. But the whole encounter left me deeply shaken. It wasn't violent, but it was undeniably unsettling. Story 13. I was at a coworker's Halloween party. Someone I didn't know, I won't name them, but a young woman, probably in her 30s, and very beautiful, came up to me to ask for a cigarette. I offered one, and we headed outside to chat and smoke. The conversation was casual at first, and we started to flirt. Things were going well, so I asked if she was seeing anyone, figuring it was my moment to ask her out. She said she had recently gotten out of a nightmare relationship. She told me that her husband would regularly threaten to off himself in front of her and their children, using an empty revolver. It got to the point where it happened every weekend. One weekend, she said, she sent the kids to stay at their grandparents' house, and then, without her husband knowing, she slipped a real bullet into the revolver. She described how the same routine happened again. He started clicking through the empty chambers one by one until the last one. Then, she made a gun shape with her hand, pointed it at her temple, and said, "That man is gone." I hadn't realized I hadn't even taken a single drag the entire time she told me the story. I quickly said goodnight and left. I never saw her again. I just hope her kids are okay. Story 14. This may or may not have been a stranger, and I'm still very confused about it to this day. So, when I was way younger, around 10, I would get scared at night and would ask my younger sister to sleep next to me. One of these nights, I woke up with a sore throat. So I went to drink some water. As I was climbing out of bed, I noticed a larger man being in the same bed as us. Me being young and foolish, I thought it was my dad that for some reason wanted to sleep in our bed. When I woke up the next day and asked my dad about it, he claimed that he slept in his bed. He's not the type of guy to sleepwalk or anything like that, so I was mostly just confused. As I've grown older, I've started to wonder if the door was ever locked, and that someone decided to sleep in my bed with us in it for some reason, although this barely would make any sense, and I still don't know if I was accidentally making it up or if it was real or not. Story 15. While working a late shift at a restaurant at 16, I had a customer who just wouldn't leave. He was around 50 and just stared at me the entire time he ate his food, which was like 2 hours for some reason. When he came up to pay, he was super weird about it. Like I'd say, "Okay, here's your price," and he'd pause and say, "Do I get a discount or something?" And I said, "No, will you be paying cash or card?" And he said, "Cash," and I said, "Okay." And then he just stared at me while I waited for him to hand me his cash. After like 2 minutes of this weird interaction, he had his change, the bill, and he could leave. So I said, "Have a good night." And he said, "Can I go now?" And I said, "Yup." Then he said something like, "Am I pestering you? Why don't I take you home and pester you there?" So I just thought, nope, and walked right back to the back room where I got my coworker to deal with him. Apparently, she scolded him and said it was shameful he would say that to a minor, and he said, "Well then, can I take you home?" What a total creep. Story 16. I was in Paris, in the train station that takes you to the airport. My flight was very early in the morning, so I planned to stay in the station until 5 a.m. or so, and then go to the airport. This man started talking to me very friendly. He praised my French and all that. He asked me where I was from, and I was totally lying because who gives a stranger real info? He asked me if I was going to the airport, and I said yes, tomorrow early in the morning. At some point I realized another guy was kind of circling us. They were from the same ethnicity. For some reason this gave me a bad vibe. I was kind of far from the other people because I was using a machine to buy tickets and several of them weren't working. I started walking toward the entrance where more people were seated and he was still trying to talk with me. The other guy was still following us, and then he said, "Do you know the station closes in like 15 minutes? I wasn't able to hide my surprise. He told me they didn't close before, but due to the number of vagrants they do now. He tried to touch my arm and I asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "You don't want to spend the night here. It's a dangerous neighborhood and a pretty lady like you, one can only imagine what could happen to you." He offered to go to a hotel room with him. I was looking at the reflection in the glass wall and realized the other guy was getting closer and I genuinely thought I was about to be abducted. I was extremely nervous. Until I heard a Latin woman with her 2 adult children. I ran to her and told her in Spanish I needed help, and she saved me. We stayed together until the station opened again. I'm forever grateful to her and her family. They saved me. I was able to return home to my real mom thanks to her. Story 17. I was taking a shower in the bathroom of the walkout basement. My 3-year-old son was upstairs with my mother eating breakfast. I heard him open the door and told him, "Mommy is in the shower, you have to wait." The door didn't close, but he didn't respond either, so I asked him to go back upstairs and ask Grandma for whatever he needed. Instead, I see a shadow and outline of a hand touching the shower curtain and realize that there is an adult in the bathroom, not my son. I scream and punch through the shower curtain. I don't think I connected, but I heard the man run out anyway. As fast as I could, I jumped out and grabbed a towel to check on my son and mom. At the same time, my mom was coming downstairs to see if I was okay from the scream. The man never went upstairs, and they didn't even know it had happened. The walkout basement door and window were open. I called the police, and they didn't find him, just my empty wallet about a block away. They did come back to me a few weeks later to let me know that they caught a guy in the area quoting women at gunpoint, and they thought it was the same guy. Never been so scared in my life. The most intense part was knowing he was just standing quietly in the bathroom while I talked to him like he was my son. Honestly, I don't know why, but that creeps me out the most. It felt really wrong at the time. Story 18. I was in high school and worked at a truck stop. One night, a trucker came in and stared at me for a long time. Wherever I moved, he was staring me down. I told him that if he needed anything, he would need to come to the counter and order it. He just grunted and kept staring. I'm not a small person, and at that time I was in football, wrestling, and track. I was also at the gym 6 days a week. I was 190 pounds of muscle and teenager hormones. But the vibes I was getting from this guy were making me nervous. I called up my other coworker and told them I was going to be in the freezer for a while. So, I was stocking the freezers and coolers for a while and then went to the bathroom. As I entered the bathroom, the trucker jumped up and walked in behind me and just stood in there while I used the restroom and washed my hands. As soon as I got out, I grabbed the trash bags and rushed outside to take care of the trash at the pumps until he left. My coworker asked me why the trucker kept following me after I finally came in. I had no idea why. He never said anything, didn't order anything, just filled up his semi, and acted strangely around me. I've never been that uncomfortable around a person before. Story 19. I was at a storage depot with my ex, picking up some stuff or other. Suddenly, and without warning, this old guy approaches out of nowhere and starts a conversation with my ex. I was in the unit at the time, so it's possible he didn't know I was there, but the clipped tone and monosyllabic answers from my ex were enough for me to know he was making her feel uncomfortable. That's when I heard him say, "Don't worry, I'm not going to say you or anything." Like literally 2 or 3 sentences into a conversation with a total stranger, he felt this would be a reassurance. So, I stepped out of the unit, making my presence known by moving some stuff around in the hall, and his whole demeanor changed, somewhere between contrition and aggression, that I dared insert myself into whatever the situation he thought this was. My ex stayed back while I kept the old man's attention on me, and he took me to task for calling him mate, a common thing British people do when they don't know someone's name, saying it was rude and disrespectful to a stranger. I responded with as rude and disrespectful as talking about calming a young woman you thought was alone. He shuffled away, mumbling something about knowing the management, leaving us both a little shaken. To this day, I have no idea what his problem was, but it was clear that he wasn't used to being confronted like that. God knows what he would have done if my ex had been alone. Story 20. I was 16, and sitting on a train station with my mother. Some man came over and started talking to her. After a while, I looked at the clock and informed my mother that we needed to go because our train was about to arrive. He flew up from the seat and started screaming at me and wanted to fight me. My mother was confused and tried to explain to him that I was her daughter and that we really did need to leave. He just continued screaming, which of course made teenage me scream back at him. She had to pull me away from there. I never understood what made him angry like that. All I did was inform my mother our train was coming, and we needed to leave. Story 21. I will never forget it. When Ghostbusters 2 came out, I really wanted to see it. My mom took me to the local theater. I think I was around 9 at the time. I needed to use the bathroom, so I ran down the narrow hallway and turned the corner only to see an older man emerging from the bathroom. When he spotted me, he immediately stopped and went back inside. I hesitated, frozen in place, until he cracked the door open again, peeking his head and arm out, motioning for me to come closer. I probably looked like a deer caught in headlights. I didn't move. The silence stretched until he finally said, come on in." Panic surged through me, and I bolted back to my mom, who immediately noticed how pale I looked. Without hesitation, she left the theater and took me home. That day in the 80s, stranger danger really hit home. I can still picture him, or at least the picture my brain made of this memory. Story 22. I was the only passenger in a train car in Europe late at night when a disheveled man entered. His wild hair and beard framed a face worn by time, and he wore a tattered sweater. He began pacing up and down the aisle, talking to himself in a language I couldn't understand. Every few laps, he'd stop right in front of me and yell something in his mysterious tongue. I tried to respond, but he didn't speak any English, just as I didn't understand his language. After a while, he'd give up yelling and return to pacing, murmuring to himself. This strange routine went on for hours. I often wished I had recorded him back then, just so I could find someone to translate what he was saying. Story 23. I was walking home from the bus stop after school, about 15 years old. It wasn't far, but some construction workers were drinking by the side of the road. One of them got up and started following me, calling out inappropriate things. I honestly can't remember the exact words, but his intentions were clear. I was only about 200 meters from home, so I sprinted. We had an automatic gate, but I knew if I waited for it to open he might catch me or worse, follow me inside. So, I climbed over it. Usually, that was tough, but that day I flew over without hesitation. I was shaken, but the real heart of the story is what happened afterward. I called my mom. Even though she had a demanding job, she dropped everything and came straight home. She made me hot chocolate and pancakes. And we sat down for a long talk. She listened, understood my fear, and made me feel truly heard. She's the best. Story 24. I once got up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom when I noticed a weird noise outside. For reference, I live in a small village, and although there are other houses, there's empty land in between, covered in waist-high vegetation. I open up the bathroom window, look outside, and there's a dude there, squatting, almost like as if he was taking a dump, but occasionally moved slowly, and that's the sound I was hearing, him moving through the brush. For a second I didn't know what to do. He could have been a robber, possibly armed, and could easily shoot at me from the window. Despite that, I ended up yelling at him, "Get out of there!" He panicked and ran towards the forest at the back of my house. My dog sensed him and kept barking, even 10 or 15 minutes after the encounter, so I was afraid he was still around and called the police. They came, searched the area for a bit, and said they couldn't see anything. I didn't sleep too well that night, but nothing worse ever came of it. I still think he must have been surveying the area, either looking into robbing us or the house on the other side of the patch, but fortunately nothing ever happened. Story 25. When I was a young girl, my mom and I had a tradition. We'd see every new Harry Potter movie in theaters as soon as it came out. I grew up alongside the characters, like many 90s-born millennials, and I think this must have been the second or third film, so around 2003. About halfway through the movie, I got up to use the bathroom. On my way back, just outside the theater door, I saw a scraggly, dirty-looking man standing there. He wore a faded blue ball cap and had his hand extended toward me, as if expecting me to take it. He asked me, "Do you want to come with me, little girl?" A heavy pit dropped in my stomach, and an overwhelming sense of danger washed over me. Something about the man, his posture, his eyes, the way he held out his hand, set off every alarm inside me. Thankfully, my mom had been diligent about teaching me stranger danger and basic street smarts. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran. Ran as fast as I could back into the theater and straight to my seat, planting myself beside my mom like nothing had happened. But she knew. She looked at me and immediately saw something was wrong. I was pale, shaken. She kept asking what was going on, but I wouldn't tell her. I couldn't. I was too scared. By the time I finally told my mom, at least half an hour had passed. She immediately took me to the theater staff, where a teenage girl, probably around 16, listened carefully and called the police. But it was too late. They searched the area, and the man was gone. I had waited too long. Even now, I carry a deep sense of guilt and regret for not speaking up sooner. I often wonder what if another little girl crossed his path that day, because I stayed silent. At the time, I had a vague sense that his intentions were wrong, dark, even, but now that I'm older, I understand just how predatory and depraved they likely were. What does a 40-year-old man want with an 8-year-old girl waiting alone outside a theater bathroom? I will never forget his face. Story 26. I was a teen working in a cinema. After cleaning and locking up, I had to go by the bank and deliver the cash to a bank box, any amount between 2 to 8,000 euros. One day, I was locking the front door. There's a pub on the other side of the alley. It was a busy night, so there was way more cash than usual. I come from a Scandinavian town that is not too busy, but sometimes, in the summer, it can get pretty crowded. I was a little nervous, because I had so much money on me. I'm a little paranoid. All of a sudden, a man in a joking tone said, "Hands up and give me the money." I got so visibly scared that he excused himself. He then left laughing, probably drunk. Man, I got scared. For some people wondering what I was doing with so much money, I knew the owners very well and they thought nobody would expect the teen that cleans up popcorn to carry the cash. Story 27. About 10 years ago, I was driving my girlfriend home around midnight on a rural back road in North Georgia. I was half asleep at the wheel when out of nowhere, a woman ran out from the woods straight into the road, screaming, "Help me." I slammed on the brakes and rolled my window halfway down, just enough to realize something was very wrong. She was covered in blood, mud, and sticks, and there was a wild look in her eyes. Before I could react, she reached into my truck and grabbed me by the neck hard. I hit the gas and drove a little farther down the road, shaken. Soon I came upon a crowd of people gathered outside a house, clearly distraught. I figured the events had to be connected. They asked if I'd seen anyone, and I told them a woman had just run into the road, nearly got herself hit. Turns out she had been released from a psychiatric facility that day. She had stabbed her mother and showed me the wound right there on her shoulder. Later that night, I drove back by the same house. There were a dozen police cars lit up in front. Creepy. Story 28. There sets two instances that stick out. 1. This was in 2011. I was about 8.5 months pregnant, driving to an OB/GYN appointment by myself. This man pulled out directly in front of me. Luckily, the right lane was empty, so I whipped over, or I would have plowed directly into the back of his big SUV with my little sedan. I was very shaken up because his actions could have killed me and my unborn baby, so I blew my horn. Apparently, that angered him because he then followed me for several miles trying to run me off the road. He only stopped when he saw a cop. 2. A few years ago, I was in desperate need of a job and a friend helped me get on with his company doing home health. My job was a home health aide, where I just go house to house, doing light housework and helping the client wash up. Most of these people were out in the boonies where I couldn't get cell service. This one client lived in such a place, he gave me weird vibes from the get-go. I showed up at his requested time, cleaned up his house, and helped him wash up. I ask if he needs anything else before I leave. He grabs me quickly and pulls me to him and says, "Yeah, you can be with me before you go." The said mission, whatever in news my no bin. Dick souls of tea no bin. Temu dix. This man, who supposedly was too weak to even shower himself, had a very tight grip on me and I couldn't get away. It probably only lasted about 5 to 10 seconds, but it was terrifying. I was alone with this man in his home, no cell service, no neighbors, and not even a landline. I was thinking how he could do whatever he wanted to me and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Story 29. My son and I were at a super crowded farmer's market. I'm thinking he's 10 or 11 at the time. He got ahead of me. I was never more than 20 to 30 feet away, and I was keeping a good eye on him so we wouldn't separate as we meandered. I happened to notice a man at a few of the same booths as my son. Then I saw him talk to my son. Okay. At this point, I was alarmed and curious. I didn't intervene. I'm big, 6 feet 3 inches tall and 260 pounds. I can tussle, and I have the drop on this guy. If he grabs my son, he's getting blindsided by this angry silverback. He kept following my son, and I noticed he was starting to look around. I'm guessing to see if anyone was watching. I started to close in a little bit. He still hadn't seen me. At this point, it's a fair assumption that he was a predator, but I didn't want to make a scene and have him just be some friendly, awkward guy. He then started to put his arm over my son's shoulder. I dropped my voice very low and spoke very loudly and called my son's name. He whipped around thinking he had done something wrong because I had on my meanest sounding dad voice. I was about 3 feet behind them and towering over both of them. The man took off. That all transpired in a matter of maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes. I saw him later getting into a pickup truck with out-of-state plates. The man had driven from another state to try to snatch a child, and on that day the universe put my child in front of this monster. While he was never in any grave danger because I caught what was going on, I could have just as easily been had my attention been elsewhere in that tiny window. Story 30. The most recent one was at Lowe's near my house. Some guy looking pretty frazzled in old camo shorts and a t-shirt was hitting on women in the store. I'm a guy. As I was walking down the main aisle, I must have passed him and accidentally interrupted him, which caused the woman he was talking to walk away. So he started following me down the main aisle, tossing quarters at every fixture near me. Eventually, I stopped walking when I reached my destination in the store. I turned around to face him. I'm not confrontational by any means, but something about it just hit a nerve, and I said in the firmest voice I could manage, "Do we have a problem?" The guy looked completely startled, turned around, and tried to get away as fast as he could. I ended up reporting the incident to the manager. I don't know what he was doing, but I hope he left and stopped bothering random women and acting so inappropriately. It was just weird. Story 31. When I was 10 and my sister was 12, we went door to door on our street, selling raffle tickets for our school. There was this one old man, maybe 65, very grizzled, whom we had never spoken to or met, but we saw him sitting on the porch, so we walked up to him to ask if he wanted to buy a ticket. He said yes and started writing his name. Then he began telling us about his terrible mother, saying that she got what she deserved. He wrote his name on the raffle ticket, but it was clearly fake because he wrote Stephen Killman. He kept going over the word kill in black pen again and again as he told us awful stories about how abusive his mother had been and how he got revenge in the end. About 6 months later, he was gone and his old house was being demolished. My sister and I went in to look around, but there was nothing except an old rotary phone. We broke about 4 windows and left. I'll never forget the sight of his old hands gripping that pen, tracing over the word kill. Story 32. This one really sticks out to me, because I haven't had any truly scary encounters. Most just made me uncomfortable. But this one scared me in a different way. I was with my girlfriend at the time, along with our 2 friends who were sisters. We were in our late 20s, walking around an outlet mall. I was about 10 feet behind the 3 of them, so to anyone else, it probably didn't look like I was with them. As they walked past a bench, I noticed a white man sitting there in a long black coat. He had no other really noticeable features. For whatever reason, I had already been watching him as they approached. The moment the girls passed, and he was out of their line of sight, he suddenly lifted a police badge, keeping it close to his body like he was trying to hide it, and pointed it toward them as they walked. He tracked them with it the entire time until they were about 5 feet away, then quickly put it away. I don't know if he stopped because he noticed me watching or not. I know this doesn't sound terrifying, but all I could think was, this guy is working up the nerve to impersonate a police officer to lure women, and one day he's going to hurt someone. I don't remember whether I got that bad feeling before or after the badge thing, but either way, it seriously creeped me out. I really hope he was just an awkward guy doing something weird, and not someone with worse intentions. Story 33. I was friends with a guy back in high school. We lived in the same neighborhood and hung out often. He eventually ended up owing someone money for weed. One day, I walked to our neighborhood corner store to grab a soda. As I stepped into the parking lot, a huge man came out of the store and noticed me. He approached and said, "You're that guy's friend, right? I've seen you 2 hanging out. He owes me. Tell me where he lives. I need to talk to him." I replied, "Oh, he lives down that way," while vaguely waving my hand toward the opposite direction from where my friend actually lived. Then I added, "Is that all you need to know?" That must have rubbed him the wrong way. He went quiet for a few seconds, and I thought the interaction was over. But just as I turned my head to walk away, he smacked me in the face, the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. And I've been hit a few times before. I honestly don't know how I wasn't knocked out. The blow sent me stumbling from the sidewalk into the street, in excruciating pain and complete shock. My vision went red and purple for a few seconds, and all I could hear was a pulsing sound, like the teachers in Charlie Brown. Thankfully, No cars were coming as I reeled across the road. I'm not the fighting type. Caught off guard, terrified, and with my head throbbing, I'll admit, I wanted nothing more to do with the situation. I just got out of there. As I was walking away, I heard him yell behind me, "That's what you get for having a smart mouth. Tell your friend to call me." Looking back, I realize my response might have come off wrong. I've always struggled a bit with social interactions and phrasing things the right way, especially under pressure. I was nervous and just blurted out something I hoped would end the conversation quickly. But honestly, it might not have mattered. Maybe he was just looking for any excuse to hit someone, and I happened to be the easiest target at the time. Luckily, I never saw that guy again. My friend, the one who owed him money, was very apologetic when he found out what happened. He even gave me a big bag of drugs as a way to say sorry. I'm not sure if he ever dealt with that man again because I stopped hanging out with him not long after. That incident wasn't the first sketchy thing to happen because of that friendship, but it was the one that finally made me realize I needed to choose my friends more wisely. Some people, even if they mean well, attract chaos, and if you don't want that in your life, it's best to keep your distance. Story 34. Back in January of last year, I at the time 21M was traveling down the Pacific coast. When I was in San Diego, I decided to go to Black's Beach, which is a clothing-optional beach just north of the city. I was just laying there working in the evening, out my tan lines, when some guy walked by. He stopped maybe 15 feet to my right and started laying out his towel. When he noticed me looking at him, he asked if he was invading my space. I thought it was a little odd how close he was given how empty the beach was that day, but I honestly didn't mind, or I wouldn't have minded, had he been able to keep his hands off himself. But he sat there on his towel, and for a good 10 minutes or so he was slowly stroking himself as he looked in my general direction. I decided to go for a walk, down to the other end of the beach. When I moved towards the end, and turned around to start heading back to my stuff, I noticed the guy not too far behind me. He had followed me on my walk. When I got back to my stuff, I started to get dressed. He did the same. He gathered all his stuff before I finished getting my stuff together. He thanked me again for letting him set up so close to me, made a joke about how he hoped he didn't creep me out, and then he started walking towards the stairs back up to the parking lot. I walked in the opposite direction down the beach, then found a more secluded spot to enjoy the beach a while longer. I guess I never really felt like I was in any danger, but it was an incredibly creepy experience, and I feel like it gave me a better understanding of what women have to deal with way too often. Story 35. I drove up solo from California to Seattle, super early in my early 20s. First solo road trip. Maybe around 5 a.m. I somehow was on a road parallel to the main highway, just a lot darker. No cars around me for miles. 5 to 10 minutes down this road, I'm just patiently waiting to get back on the main highway when lights just appear, maybe 4 car lengths behind me. I stress that there is no way this car could have crept up on me, and I don't remember seeing any cars parked on the side. It was a 2-lane stretch, so I sped up and merged to the right, and this car followed and sped up. This went on for 20 minutes. No matter what I did, it's still pitch black out, but we finally get back to the highway, and this car refuses to let up. I tried to keep the paranoia to a minimum, but at the last minute I hit an off-ramp to throw this car off. Story 36. Honestly, undercover cop. I had one here in PA. Try to pull that nonsense on me, on I-83. And I just sent my Merc as fast as that lumbering beauty would go. I was terrified. He had to have followed me for 6 minutes, and I noticed 2 minutes or so in, since it was around midnight. Then, I saw the police lights. The guy tries to be snarky, saying, "You know how fast you were going?" I tried explaining that it's 12 o'clock and I'm being followed for 6 minutes. I told him I have dashcam footage backed up. He replied with a sarcastic, "Yeah, sure," and handed me a ticket. I took it to court, showed the dashcam video, has a camera facing the inside as well, most importantly, and showed a 6'2" man panicking at being followed. You could see me trying to gauge how many people were in the car and all. The judge tossed the ticket, and it wasn't the officer's first time. He was eventually given paid leave. He had done this to countless people, ending up in court 7 times. Story 37. I was on a train to Glasgow at about 2:30 in the afternoon. As it slows down, a guy gets up to wait on the doors opening. He notices me sitting near the doors. I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt, Converse, and a black coat that is nothing political. He shouts, "I see you, you IRA traitor," and suddenly punches me. Thankfully, the train had a few people on it who all jumped up and pushed the guy off when the train came to a complete halt, and he just sauntered away like nothing had happened. Physically, I was okay. The punch hurt but did no major damage, but I was pretty shaken up by the whole thing. Story 38. The homeless guy asked me for change while I was working nights. I told him, "Sorry, I don't have any." Very calmly, he replied, "How about we go to an ATM and take some money out before I hurt you?" You don't have to be able to run fast, you just have to be able to run faster than the person you're scared of. He didn't end up chasing me. I was too scared to even look back. Story 39. I was a bartender, manager at a restaurant. This customer had come in a few times, and the lovely owner informed him that since he was coming in to go directly to the bar, he could park in the back and come in the back entrance, like some of our regulars did. This was also the entrance where all employees park and enter, because the parking would be safer for his Corvette. One night, as I was managing bartending, he informed me that he had parked behind my car and wouldn't move until I agreed to go for a ride with him. He literally sat in the bar for like 3 hours. I told him over and over that I was not getting in his car with him at all. Finally, as I'm checking out all of the servers, he is still sitting there, and one of the male servers, Caleb, says, "Oh sure, I'll go for a ride with you." So they hop in the car and take off. I rushed to get my stuff done and leave, so I could be gone as quickly as possible before they came back. The next day, Caleb tells me the ride started out normal, and then the guy wouldn't stop. He ended up over an hour away, and then kicked him out of the car because he couldn't get him any illegal substances. I'm absolutely certain I would have been in serious danger if I had gotten in that car. Story 40. I was drunk walking home from a party. I only lived 5 minutes from the party location, but I was an alcohol-fueled foolish person for going home alone, because there was a racist person on the loose in the area. There had been 3 cases within 2 weeks a few streets from where I walked. Still, I thought for some reason the danger didn't apply to me, a 21-year-old woman at the time, because I grew up in a small sheltered village. So, I was making my way home, carrying 2 heavy books as well, because I promised someone I'd pick those up for her, when a man emerged from an alley and tried to stop me. He tried to ask me something. Despite my state, I realized this was not good. I was alone with him. It was 3 o'clock at night. Why would he be so persistent? He began following me. For a second, I could practically feel him at my back. I immediately pulled out my phone and called a guy I was dating at the time, my now boyfriend. The first thing I said was, "Hey, I said I'm walking home, but I said I'm being followed. Will you stay on the line with me?" My pursuer disappeared into the first alley we passed. I have no idea whether he really had any harmful intentions at all. That man was caught a week later. Still, I never walk or bike home alone anymore, and I bought pepper spray, or the legal variant of pepper spray in my country, the very next day. Story 41. When I was in high school, my 2 friends and I were walking on the side of the road to a McDonald's. It was really dark out, but about 20 feet up and on the other side of the road we started to notice a lighter clicking, like definitely at us. We whispered about it but kept walking, hoping to pass by. A homeless man walked pretty quickly out of the dark towards us, saying, "Hey, I know you see me." We tried to just keep moving. He said, "I just need some money." We kept walking until he said, "I know y'all don't want to get hurt over some money." We stopped and turned to face him, petrified. I kind of led the conversation, telling him we'd give him what we had and to just take it easy. We pulled out our wallets and started to give him the few dollars we had, and he sat down on the grass clutching the cash and sobbed about how hungry he was. I had kept a $5 bill from him, so I pulled it out and gave it to him, saying there's a McDonald's right there and to go get himself something to eat. He just kept crying and praying, saying, "Lord help me." We decided to leave him there, and all I could say was, "God bless you, man," and we kept walking. That was a real eye-opener for me. Kind of inverse to that one. I was at a Taco Bell with some friends on a road trip. I went back to the counter to order some more food, and this guy approached me. He looked how you'd imagine the kind of stranger you should probably avoid. He couldn't stop stuttering and was visibly nervous. He kept saying, "Man, something's wrong with my truck. If you could come take a look at it?" I told him I was probably the least qualified person there to help, but he insisted, "Man, if you could just take a look at it. I don't know what's wrong with it." I had no intention of doing so, but I glanced at my friends, and they were all shaking their heads. One of them very loudly said, "My name." I nodded to let them know I understood the situation. When I turned back, the man was already halfway out the door and headed back to his car. It still shakes me to think about how easily something could have gone wrong if I didn't listen to my gut and my friends. Not sure what the takeaway is here. Some people are just stuck in hard times and don't feel like they have options. Some people want to do terrible, terrible things to others. Always better to assume the latter, I guess. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.